Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to Nerdology. I'm Mohamed, and this is the full in-depth review of the Xiaomi Mi 5 after 1 year. So, let's get started. So this is Xiaomi's answer to the flagship killer trend that's been spreading lately. How would it be if Xiaomi was able to compete with OnePlus 3 or the ZTE Axon 7 or the Honor 8 or any of these phones that aim to deliver the best possible specs for a very affordable price? Usually these phones come anywhere from $500 to $300. Can Xiaomi provide a phone that is actually able to compete with these phones? And the answer is, according to the price, yes. You can get the base model of the Xiaomi Mi 5 for only $260. That is the equivalent of 5,000 pounds in Egypt, which is an insane value for the money. But can Xiaomi provide this value without actually cutting any corners? Well, let's find out. First off, let's get started with the packaging. And this is the Xiaomi Mi 5's box. It's a pretty standard box, nothing fancy about it. And it only comes with this, and of course the USB cable. It comes with a standard Quick Charge 2.0 charger, even though this phone supports Quick Charge 3.0. And obviously, as an owner of a Quick Charge 3.0 phone, I would actually like to take advantage of this feature, but I can't do that because this has included the Quick Charge 2.0 charger. So again, you can see where Xiaomi cut some corners, and of course there are no headphones included in a flagship phone. Again, you can start seeing where the corners have been cut. So let's get back to the phone here. This is a Snapdragon 820 phone, of course, with a full HD panel, a 5.5 full HD IPS panel and specific, 32 gigabytes of non-expandable storage, 3 gigabytes of RAM, and a 3000 mAh lithium-ion battery. And of course, dual SIM support, a dual standby, of course, no dual active functionality here. So again, this is your average run-of-the-mill flagship, and this is a lot similar to the OnePlus 3 in terms of the design and of course in terms of the specifications. But as you can see, of course, some of the corners have also been cut in terms of the specifications because you can only get 32 gigabytes of storage here without any expandable options. And you gotta get 3 gigabytes of RAM instead of having 4, or even a ridiculous overkill like the 6 gigabytes of RAM that exists on the OnePlus 3. So again, you can see that, and even the processor is cut down. You're gonna have to deal with a Snapdragon 820 1.8 gigahertz clocking speed instead of having the usual 2.1 clocking speed that you can find on most other Snapdragon 820 phones. And of course, there's a Hi-Fi deck included on the higher model, on the Mi 5s, on the other high models of the Mi 5s. And unfortunately, this base model of the Mi 5 doesn't include the Hi-Fi DAC. What you have is the standard Snapdragon 820 DAC, which means you're going to probably get some underwhelming performance out of it. Why? Because Xiaomi doesn't even bother modifying the stack. It doesn't even bother amping up the DAC. So you get a pretty basic audio performance out of this phone. So first off, let's go with the design. This is an absolutely beautiful phone. I gotta give it to Xiaomi. Xiaomi knows how to make a phone attractive. This has the glass sandwich design with the trim in the middle using aluminum. Of course, it's just fantastic. It feels light, it feels premium, and it just looks fantastic. On the front, it's gonna probably look like every other Samsung phone or every other phone with a home button. It's gonna look pretty darn generic. But on the back, though, this curved glass makes it sound like a reversed S7 Edge, and I just love how this phone feels in the hand. It just feels compact, it feels manageable, and of course with the cut down bezels on the side, it really feels great in the hand. It just doesn't feel like it's a bulky or massive phone. You can reach most of the UI elements, you can reach the top of the screen without any hand gymnastics. It feels fine. You can just use the phone one-handed and you wouldn't even have any problem. Granted, Xiaomi provides a two-handed mode, but a one-handed mode which shrinks down the display a little bit just to make things a bit more manageable. But you don't really need to use this because, again, it works. It just fits the hand like a glove, and it's light and it's lovely. I really like the design. Of course, now let's go over to the top. You're going to find a 3.5mm jack, thank God. An IR blaster, again, thank God. I don't know why this feature is ignored by so many manufacturers, even though it's cheap. Guys, come on, include IR blasters. You have no idea how useful this thing is. I mean, there are times when I couldn't find the TV remote or the receiver remote next to me, and I just used this, the IR blaster. It's so easy to set up, and of course, combined with Pure Remote app, you can actually find TV remote schedules on it. So this makes it a really compelling package. I really don't know why manufacturers start ignoring the IR blaster. And of course, you're going to find the noise canceling mic, 2 antenna bands on the top, and you're going to find the speaker and the microphone on the bottom, and a USB-C right in the middle, and of course surrounded by the antenna bands, and of course the beautiful glass back with dual LED flash and the 16 megapixel camera on the back, which has optical image stabilization. And of course, you're going to find on the front the fingerprint sensor along with the home button and 2 hidden navigation buttons. There's nothing on them. They're just illuminated navigation buttons. And you're going to find the ambient sensors and the earpiece, and of course the front-facing 4 megapixel camera, 4 ultra pixel camera, that is, which means it can soak in a lot of light. We're going to talk a little bit more about this camera. And of course, you're going to find the beautiful 5.15 full HD IPS panel on the front. So first off, let's talk about one of the most important features in any flagship these days, the fingerprint sensor. And it works. It's really, really fast. It's a very fast fingerprint sensor. Honestly, it's one of the fastest fingerprint sensors I've seen in recent history, because I mean, this thing can go toe-to-toe against some of the best phones. It can go up against the Nexus 6P. It can even go up against an iPhone 6X, or even a OnePlus 3. Granted, the OnePlus 3 is a bit faster, but gee, this thing is really, really fast. And it even works faster when the screen is unlocked. It's super fast. It's just crazy responsive, and it can read your fingerprint in any possible position, for example, like this, or even reversed, like this. It just works. It's a fantastic fingerprint sensor, and you can also lock some of the applications on the phone here. The phone has some software to do that. You can actually lock some applications using fingerprint sensors, using the fingerprint sensor, which is also a really nice touch. So if you have any nosy people who like to check out the gallery or like to check out your phone log or something, just put a locking screen on it and just use your fingerprint to unlock them. It's a relatively simple process to do. So let's talk about the display. This is a 5.5-inch IPS display, and I don't know. I don't think this is a flagship display, and I'm not talking about the resolution. I know that a lot of people are going to say that, you know what, you're not going to find any difference between a 2K display and a 1080p display. And honestly, yeah, there isn't much difference, of course. I have an Axon 7 as well, and when I put both of them together and next to each other, I really can't find a difference. I really can't tell the difference between a 2K and a 1080p display. They mostly look the same. What I'm talking about, though, is the brightness of the display, the viewing angles of the display, the color calibration of the display. It just doesn't stand out. This isn't the best 1080p panel. For a flagship, I'd expect it to be the best 1080p panel. If it is a 1080p panel, then it should be the best among all the other mid-rangers. And unfortunately, I've made many other comparisons with other mid-ranger phones, like the Xiaomi Redmi Note 3 and the Alcatel Idol 3, and it just didn't stand out. It's a really generic 1080p panel. Even the Idol 3 was actually better in terms of both brightness and viewing angles, which is a little bit odd. But for what it's worth, this is a really decent 1080p panel, and it's got 600 nits of brightness, which means you can see this thing just fine in broad daylight. I never had trouble seeing this thing in direct sunlight. I usually use it on 2 modes. I use it on auto at full brightness in direct sunlight, and I use it at half brightness indoors, and I switch between them easily, and I never had a problem seeing this display in direct sunlight. It's just a really good display panel. However, there are some problems with it, mainly the touch response. Now, granted, this display works fine for gaming and everything, and tapping things. It's quite responsive, doesn't really need a lot of force to tap. Everything works just fine. But the main problem here is when it comes to scrolling down in this display. Of course, it wouldn't show here, but again, there are a lot of times when the display registers touch instead of swiping. So for example, I'm swiping through my Facebook feed or my Instagram feed or, for example, on a website, and all of a sudden, while scrolling, this thing thinks that I'm touching a certain element on the display and actually goes there. So for example, I could just like a post just because the phone thought that while I'm scrolling, I actually touched the like button when I actually didn't do that. For example, when I'm scrolling down through a certain result page on Google Chrome, it could actually open up the link by accident because it thought that I touched that link instead of actually scrolling down. This becomes a massive annoyance, and it happens quite often that it really becomes irritating when it happens. So yeah, this is one of the main negatives of the display, and I don't think it's a software issue, but if it is a software issue, then I hope that Xiaomi works on it fast and just like fixes it as fast as possible, because this is becoming a major annoyance. Of course, I want to talk about the audio of this phone, and yeah, it's got a bottom firing speaker, and it's really not one of the best. Again, I've made several comparisons to not flagships only. I've made comparisons with mid-rangers, and this speaker is as average as it could possibly get. Let me open up a YouTube song, for example. I haven't really opened the Wi-Fi. Yeah, this is, for example, a song here. As you can see, it's not really that much impressive in terms of the bottom firing speaker. It does distort a little bit at higher volumes, and it doesn't have a lot of bass response to it. It's just a really average speaker. Is it loud enough? Yes. Does it get the job done? Sure, yeah. Is it one of the best speakers ever? Is it a flagship worthy speaker? Definitely not. Does it even compete with mid-rangers? I don't think so. Again, I've made several comparisons to other mid-rangers, and this really doesn't stand out. So for a flagship, it's pretty darn disappointing. And about the audio performance of this phone, which is really important for me, the audio through the headphone jack disappoints massively. The loudness on this headphone is pretty much below average. I've heard a lot of praise about the Mi5's audio jack performance, and I thought that the audio performance could be absolutely one of the best flagship performances of the year. It could be like one of the best audio performances on any flagship available to date. And it could even go toe-to-toe against an Axon 7, for example. But again, I was massively disappointed to find out that this specific model, not just the other Mi5 models, the Mi5 models are just fine, they have great audio performance. This specific model, the base model, doesn't have the hi-fi DAC in it, which means it uses the standard Snapdragon 820 DAC without any modifications. Xiaomi doesn't even bother to amp this extremely basic chipset. It just leaves it the way it is, and it just lets you suffer with a below average DAC. This thing doesn't really do great with high-powered headphones. If you want to really crank this thing up to the loudest possible volume and you want to use some high-powered headphones with it, this becomes a major issue, and you really start to notice that, yeah, you know what, this isn't as powerful as you could possibly imagine. Is it balanced? Yes. Does it have a really good bass response? Yes. Are most of the frequencies done well and handled well? Yeah, sure, but it's not very loud, and that's the main problem. Even my standard Panasonic earbuds couldn't actually go loud enough for me to actually drown out the external noises, because again, the output is just massively disappointing. And again, I've made comparisons to other mid-rangers, not just flagships, and they again came out on top. I've even made comparisons to some of the DAC units on low-end phones, and guess what? They actually did better than the Mi5. This is an embarrassing showing from Xiaomi, to say the least, and I don't even know why they had to cut these corners. I really don't know. The phone again costs $260. It's not like I'm buying a flagship for $100 for them to cut so many corners. So the audio performance doesn't really impress that much, to say the least. What about the audio? What about the call quality? Again, this is actually a really positive point for Xiaomi. This thing, due to the glass panel on the back and the antenna bands showing up on the top and the bottom, this has some of the best cell reception I've seen in years. It's phenomenal, really great cell reception. I've never had any problem receiving calls or making calls, and the calls came out clear on both sides and loud enough. The earpiece does a really decent job. It's loud, but not too loud. It gets the job done. Again, call quality and texting isn't going to be a problem. And again, every phone should have really good call quality. If I'm buying a flagship and it can't even make calls or send SMSs, then what's the purpose of that phone, right? So again, phone calls shouldn't really be a problem. Now let's talk about the camera. This has a 16 megapixel camera and on the back with optical image stabilization and a front-facing camera with 4 ultra pixels. Now, of course, the interface is relatively simple and it seems a lot similar to iOS. And again, Xiaomi is a Chinese company, and they're pretty much called the Apple of China because, again, the designs are quite similar to Apple. The UI is quite similar to Apple. This company doesn't shy away from looking like Apple. So obviously the camera app is going to look a lot similar to, a certain Apple manufacturer. So again, the interface is really nice. The camera app doesn't have a lot of modes. It's got the audio capturing picture, which means it's a picture that goes along with audio. There's beautify mode. Again, that's the standard for most Asian phones. Square mode, which takes a half and half picture. You're going to find, of course, the timer mode, the straighten mode, which helps you taking more straight photos, of course. Better landscape photos, obviously. The tilt shift, which is pretty much a slow motion mode. There's the manual mode, of course, to tinker a little bit deeper with the settings of the camera. And, of course, the panorama mode. So, yeah, again, it's a very standard camera app. But how does this thing actually handle taking pictures? Now, the camera quality in both direct sunlight and low light performance is actually good. The low light performance isn't the best, and it's not the worst. It's just average. It doesn't have the highest details, but it's definitely far from the worst low light performance I've seen to date. So yeah, the low light performance is something you shouldn't worry about in case if you take pictures in low light. This shouldn't be a problem. You're gonna do just fine with this camera. It is an average camera when it comes to low light pictures, but when it comes to daylight pictures, this thing stands its ground. Trust me, this thing is a great camera. It handles exposure great. The colors come out pretty darn balanced. It doesn't oversaturate stuff. It doesn't really over sharpen stuff. It's just the right camera. This Sony sensor on the back is fantastic. Again, it's one of the best Sony sensors, and it exists in most phones like the OnePlus 3 and a lot of other phones. It's a pretty popular sensor because, again, it does a great job. And with the proper software on it, again, pictures are going to come out absolutely fantastic. So, again, picture taking for the back camera, you're not going to have much problem with it. You're going to have plenty sharp pictures. You're going to have really colorful and vivid pictures. You're not really going to have a problem with it. And for the front-facing camera, again, some people thought that some of the front camera samples, they thought that they were taken by the back camera because they were so good. They were extremely sharp and very clean looking pictures. Again, I love the front-facing camera performance. Easily one of my favorite cameras when it comes to selfies. Just a great front-facing camera. However, the colors do turn out a bit washed out. There's a difference when I'm comparing the scenery through the back camera and the front camera, and the scenery that is taken via the front-facing camera, it just looks a little bit washed out, and obviously, of course, less detailed than the back camera. But yeah, what I'm disappointed with is how it does with the color saturation of the pictures, and of course, and yeah, that's it. Just a little bit less details than a 16 megapixel camera, obviously, of course. But where this camera falls apart, though, is the video capturing of it. Even though this thing has an optical image stabilization, which means it should do great in general when it comes to video capturing, it's got a really bad audio capturing chipset on the phone. So the mic here on the bottom is going to do a horrible job when it comes to recording anything. Everything is going to sound tinny and everything's going to crackle. Just it's not going to sound good. It's not a lot of depth in the voice that's being captured. So my sound, I'm going to sound extremely thin on the camera. My voice isn't going to have a lot of depth to it. And it's not really going to capture music audio, for example, really good. It's not going to have a lot of details in the audio. So yeah, the audio definitely disappoints. That's the battery warning here, of course. And yeah, again, even the focusing isn't that good. Again, the camera struggles to focus a lot in low light, which is, again, a bit of a problem. It's going to focus in and out, in and out, in and out. It's going to be an extremely tedious process to have, to shoot videos using this camera. Does it do a good job with the optical image stabilization? Yeah, of course, most cameras do that. But it's the details that are coming out on the videos that aren't very impressive. The colors that are coming out on the videos aren't very impressive. And obviously, of course, the audio capturing on the camera, again, is awful. It's just easily one of the worst audio capturing I've seen on any camera, to say the least. So again, this phone is more of a mixed bag for the camera. The pictures are going to come out great. The videos, not so much. So yeah, again, this is an issue, of course, with the Xiaomi Mi 5. This is the section where I talk a little bit more about the software. Easily the most important aspect for me on a phone. Yeah, but you know what? First off, let's go over the battery. The battery is great. It's a really good battery at the beginning. So within the first 3 months, I usually got about 4 to 5 hours of screen on time. Now I get anywhere from 3 to 3.5 hours if I'm lucky. Sometimes it even goes down to 2.5 hours, which is really bad. This is a genuinely bad battery performance. This is below average. If the phone goes below 3 hours, this is definitely below average. And I had to keep a power bank with me at all times because, again, this phone drains like hell. The standby times are good. Yeah, you're going to lose about 4 to 5% every day, which, again, is great. But again, the performance itself isn't that great, and the battery drains fast. And so yeah, if you intend to use this phone for about a couple of years from now, you might have a problem with the battery. The charging times are also relatively fast. This phone charges up to 90% within only 1 hour, which is impressive. This phone is crazy fast and one of the fastest phones if you're using a Quick Charge 3.0. If you're using this charger with it, it's going to charge in about a couple of hours, which is just average. So buy a Quick Charge 3.0 to take advantage of the quick charge capability on this phone. So let's talk about the software. Oh boy. Oh my God, Xiaomi. Wow. I'm not impressed. Like, I'm not saying this because I'm not impressed, because I'm impressed. I am not impressed. Xiaomi as a company started out as a software development company. They just rooted out, they sprouted out of their MIUI. They had this custom ROM that was called MIUI, and it was one of the most popular ROMs to have on any phone. It was a crazy popular ROM, and it provided a genuinely great experience. So obviously this company had far more expertise than Samsung and Sony and LG and HTC and all these major brands. It had far more experience when it comes to software development. And I was expecting a lot. I came in expecting a lot in terms of customization, in terms of stability, in terms of polish, in terms of a lot of other aspects, but I came out severely disappointed. So first off, let's talk about the update cycle or the update policy of the Xiaomi phones. If you're lucky, you're going to get about one major update for this phone. Just one. So this phone comes out on Marshmallow. I bought it on Marshmallow, and I don't know, the date of this video probably is around, I'd say 22nd September or something, yeah? It still didn't get the Nougat update. Literally every other flagship and every other mid-ranger got the Nougat update except for this phone. And this phone is supposed to be a flagship, and still to this very date, it still didn't get Nougat. We even had the announcement of the Android Oreo just a couple of days ago, like maybe a week ago or a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, the Xiaomi is still considering to have Android 7.0 on this phone, which is sad. Like I think Google is going to release Android 8.0, and they would still be considering to release Android 7.0 on this phone. This is embarrassingly slow as an update. Xiaomi, however, does care a little bit more about the MIUI itself. So yeah, they're going to update really old phones with MIUI, with new versions of MIUI. So you're gonna have really old phones that are actually able to keep up with some of the features and some of the specs and some of the awesome features that some of the most advanced phones, some of the more newer phones have as of now. So yeah, this is great. Your old phone could pretty much keep up with a flagship Xiaomi phone. Your old Xiaomi phone could keep up with a flagship from Xiaomi. So this is good. This is definitely good. And MIUI is a very extensively customized UI. And that means they could allow a lot of really awesome features. For example, on the status bar, they include a battery level for Bluetooth devices, which is something I love. I mean, to this very date, Android doesn't even have a native function to actually show the battery levels of Bluetooth devices. I don't know why it hasn't been included so far. It seems like an arbitrary feature to include. It seems like a given to exist on every Android phone. But yeah, it doesn't exist. Xiaomi, however, includes it, which I'm glad that it's been included. And yeah, it offers a lot of really nice customization features here. You can see some of the additional settings here. You can actually include a quick ball setting, which looks like this little ball here. It shows the home, the recent apps, the lock, the screenshot, and the back button. It's a really handy quick ball to include. It's a lot similar to iPhone again. You can customize a lot about the headphone sound effects as well. You can also have a one-handed mode. And again, you know, Xiaomi tries to include its own ecosystem. There's a lot of Xiaomi Mi accounts, you know, Mi Cloud account, Mi Mover account, lots of Mi apps that just aim to have their own ecosystem. Again, Google Play isn't allowed in China. You know, China and Google doesn't really have the best relationship. So yeah, most Chinese phones don't have Google apps integrated. So again, Xiaomi tries to do its own thing by having its own Mi Store, its own theme store, its own Mi Mover, its own Mi Cloud, its own Mi Messages, and it's all linked by one account. So if you had a previous Xiaomi phone with its own settings, with its own contacts, with its own messages, you can just log in with your own Mi account and boom. There you are. Everything is exactly the same. The applications, the messages, the contacts, everything is exactly the same. I love some of the additions that Xiaomi did with its UI. MIUI is definitely one of the most extensively customized experiences I've seen to date. It does lack some very necessary features, like for example, double tap to lock. I really don't know why they haven't included this, but yeah, again, it does have a lot of customizability features. But what about the most important feature? What about the most important aspect of this UI? The polish, the stability of this UI, the lack of bugs. Is it good? Is it reliable? Unfortunately, no, it's not. In fact, it's one of the buggiest experiences I've had in years. For example, there are times when the back button doesn't respond. I keep tapping it so many times and it just doesn't respond. Of course, now it responds. No, actually, no. Yeah, now it doesn't respond. See, like I told you, the back button worked just a little bit before, but now it just refuses to function completely. The recent apps, there it is. It works just fine. The back button, however, doesn't work. And yeah, this is not an effective model. In case if you're wondering, this is not an effective model. It doesn't have anything wrong with it. This is a purely software issue because after the update of Android of MIUI 8.2, I started facing this issue and Xiaomi didn't even bother updating. You see, the thing is, Xiaomi with its update policy is that they would probably issue an update on a yearly basis. So if you had Android MIUI 8.0, you're going to probably have to wait for about a year to have the MIUI 9.0. So that means you're going to have to live for an entire year with the bugs that exist on this phone. You're just going to have to deal with it. Find a way to deal with it. Fix those bugs. Do something. But you're going to have to live with those bugs for about a year. And this is horrible. This is absolutely awful. I don't know why Xiaomi, like not only is Xiaomi really slow in terms of the Android updates, they're also slow in their own software updates. And this has a lot of ramifications, including a non-functioning navigation button. There you go. I'm pressing so many times and it doesn't work. The RAM management is also horrible, horrendous on this phone. It literally kills every application in the background. If you're opening, for example, Facebook in a browser, that browser is going to probably crash. You're going to browse the Facebook just fine. The performance is going to be great. I mean, again, this is a Snapdragon 820 phone, and it's got the 1.8 gigahertz clocking speed. And again, you're not really going to notice on a day-to-day usage, you're not really going to notice a difference between, say, an Axon 7 or a OnePlus 3. They're both going to keep up. They're going to be extremely close in terms of performance. They're going to run games just as smooth, not a problem. So yeah, the 1.8 gigahertz of speed, that's not the problem. You could probably tell me that, yeah, maybe it's the 1.8 gigahertz of speed. Maybe it's the 3 gigabytes of RAM that's the issue with the RAM management here. But no, MIUI in general handles multitasking horribly. It just handles, it doesn't know what to do with those RAMs. It literally kills everything in the background, which becomes a major issue. If I, for example, was playing a game and I received a phone call, that game would probably crash. Apparently the phone can't handle making a call and playing a game at the same time. A flagship Snapdragon 820 phone can't handle doing those two tasks. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's the notification sound. Yeah, again, it can't handle both tasks combined. My Sony Xperia Z2, which is the phone I had before the Mi5, handles multitasking way better than this phone, and it also has 3 gigabytes of RAM and a Snapdragon 801. This is bad. This really looks bad for Xiaomi because, again, the multitasking is awful for a flagship, and that's the least I'm expecting. I'm expecting a really good performance package overall, and I didn't get half of it, which is the multitasking. And again, a common factor of the MIUI operating system is, of course, it has issues with the notifications. Yes, MIUI, it's a common factor with most MIUI phones. Yeah, look at the Redmi Note 3, look at the Redmi Note 4, look at the Xiaomi Mi5X or any of those recent Xiaomi phones. They're going to probably have the same problem, which is notification issues. You're not going to probably receive Facebook notifications. You're going to probably not receive some Instagram notifications unless you open those applications. When you open those applications, oh, here you go, man. You have like 5 or 6 notifications missing. Where were you at, man? Like, where did you go? Again, MIUI doesn't know how to run applications in the background. It doesn't know how to receive notifications. And again, there are a lot of applications that are actually meant to run in the background. For example, like LastPass. And another one, clipboard action, for example. These are like few samples or few examples of applications that are running in the background. And again, MIUI kills them. So it's like these applications aren't even installed on this device. They exist, yes, but when you come to, when you come across a certain entry field, to kind of like enter your password and email, LastPass isn't going to turn on. The LastPass dialog box isn't even going to show up. It's not going to show. It's like the application isn't even installed because, again, MIUI is just an absolute expert in killing all the background applications. This isn't RAM management. This isn't battery management. This is bad. This is just like downright bad. MIUI doesn't know how to handle these applications in the background, and that becomes a major annoyance. I can't even trust this phone to handle multitasking. I can't trust it. I can't trust to receive notifications on a constant basis. I have to open each and every one of my favorite applications to actually see if there are notifications because the phone isn't going to actually deliver them. Until this very date, this phone is actually stuck on Android 6.0. There it is. Android 6.0. The camera isn't able to focus it. Yeah, there it is. Android 6.0. Till this very date, a flagship is stuck to Android 6.0. And again, as you can see, the back button is back to work again. Like I said, for a flagship, the updates, the bugs, and all these stuff are pretty much a deal breaker, for me anyway, because I expected a smooth, solid experience, reliable phone to have, but I was met with a lot of issues. And granted, I love MIUI in terms of the customization. I love a lot of touches that they had in terms of the screenshot taking ability, and in terms of being able to switch those navigation buttons and having actions for each and every one of them. For example, if you held on the back button, you could have a certain customizable action. If you held on the recent app button, it's going to have certain applications, certain actions taken. Of course, you can even modify this recent apps so that it would look like this. I loved some of the touches that these phones had. I just love the customization features of MIUI, and it seems to be really well thought out. For example, you can also find the weather info here. Usually there's a weather info on the top. Again, I loved a lot of aspects about the MIUI itself, but again, the MIUI is pretty much not good. It's not good to have on this phone. It's not good to have on a flagship. It might do a great job on a mid-ranger. It might do a great job on a low-end phone, but on a flagship, no. It's just not good to have. Absolutely. The experience that it provides is just not reliable. I can't have a flagship that doesn't know how to handle RAMs. I can't have a flagship that doesn't know how to receive notifications. I can't have a flagship phone that can't even have two applications running simultaneously. These are some massive issues with Xiaomi, and I hope that Xiaomi works on them as fast as possible, because again, I don't think I'm going to go again through other Xiaomi phones. I'm not going to go at least flagships, because I didn't have a lot of negative experiences with the mid-rangers. Again, I had the Xiaomi Redmi Note 3, which was a fantastic phone. Notifications worked just fine. Caching offline worked just fine. Multitasking was relatively decent for a mid-ranger anyway. So yeah, again, I had most of these problems were prominent in a flagship from Xiaomi. So again, you can have a positive experience with Xiaomi when it comes to their mid-rangers, but when it comes to their flagships, I don't know. It's a huge gamble. And if it was up to me, I'd probably focus on phones like the Axon 7 or the Honor 8 or the OnePlus 3. Yes, they're more expensive. Yes, they cost $100 or maybe $150 more, but they're worth it. You're going to have a great experience. You're going to have a great multitasking experience. You're going to have, just in general, great phones. So again, you could take a gamble and try out the Xiaomi Mi 5, and it might turn out great for you, or it might turn out to be bad. But yeah, this phone pretty much falls apart in the software. Everything else is anywhere from average to great. Anywhere from average to great. Yeah, the camera is great in some aspects. It's average in some aspects. It was able to stand its ground against an iPhone 6s, which is great. The performance is great in some aspect, and it also falls apart in some other aspects. And the display, again, the whole phone is a mixed bag. The whole phone is a mixed bag. It doesn't really excel in one aspect. Maybe the one aspect that excels in is probably the fingerprint sensor, and maybe, just maybe, the camera. But yeah, everything else is a mixed bag, and I don't think this is a worthy showing from Xiaomi anyway as a flagship killer. I wouldn't consider this a flagship killer because it's not able to stand up against phones like the Axon 7 or the OnePlus 3 or even the Honor 8. I hope that Xiaomi does better on the Mi 6. I really haven't tried out the Mi 6 yet, but I hope that Xiaomi works a lot on the Mi 6 and makes it a much, much better experience than the Mi 5 is, at least the base model. I had issues with the base model, and I'm not hugely satisfied with it. I don't think it's a flagship. It's more of a high-end mid-ranger phone. So yeah, that was my opinion of the Xiaomi Mi 5. And after a year, of course, I had to replace the phone with the Axon 7 because I couldn't stand the software experience that I had on this phone. And I had to choose the Axon 7 instead. And so far, I've been extremely satisfied. I might even review the Axon 7 soon. So guys, stay tuned. Like and subscribe if you want to. Thank you for watching the review. I'll see you soon.